Greetings. How do we determine right and wrong in this nation of Guyana? How do we know when something is right and how do we know when something is wrong? I have noticed that as this election process, the count and the recount would have unfolded, that we have on the media all kinds of statements being made in a very derogatory manner towards opposite races. And it has, I believe, revealed that we have a serious problem in our country with racism. I do not believe that racism was created with this election, but I believe that racism was exposed during this election. Because for some reason, because of social media, people feel that they are free to say whatever comes to their mind or whatever actually would be on their minds. And therefore I have noticed, for example, that if an act is done that is wrong, it is despicable, that many individuals who realize that the person who would have done that despicable act are of the same race as theirs, then they'll be quiet because they do not want to speak against any wrongdoing that is done by a person of their race. But yet if someone from another race now would do that same wrong deed, they'll be quick to jump and to condemn that individual and that wrong deed because that person is of a different ethnicity. I have noticed that truth now has almost become like, well, it depends on which race the person is that is doing it. And so if it is of another race, man, we don't want to accept that. But if it's from our race, of course it is good. It's become so bad in our nation now that you would have something happening and you can look at a certain section of the media and they will tell you a piece of the story. You can look at another section of the media, they'll tell you a piece of the story. In other words, what I want us to know is that we are being played. We are being played. And we have actors that are being used now to play us as a people in this nation. Our politicians, they seem to benefit when we are racially divided, when we are fighting against each other. We need to recognize that we need to see people not for the pigment of their skin and for the texture of their hair, but rather for the content of their character. We need to begin to start to say, what are the policies politically that you are going to implement so that we can have this country being developed? Instead of looking and saying, well, this man is going to be my leader because we're of the same ethnic group. This man is going to be my leader because he's of the same ethnic group. And he can't be my leader because he's not of my ethnic group. We need to stop allowing ourselves to be so racial in our judgment and begin to look at the content of a person's character and to begin to look at the principles that a person would possess so that we can be able to move forward. Because at the end of the day, when the politicians are finished moving us around as their pawns and they get into power, do we believe that they are going to come and they're going to look for us to say, okay, how can I help you? Have you noticed that regardless of who is in power, that it is only the supporters of whoever is in power that will get the best of the benefits? If you want a piece of land and your party is in power, then you're able to, and you know some linkage, you're able to get a piece of land. But if you want a piece of land and it's not your party in power, you can't get that land. And so what we notice is that we have political parties that are busy trying to do good things for those who are loyal to them. Why not do things for everyone, for every ethnic group? And yet we allow ourselves to be pawns. We fight among ourselves. While those who are our leaders politically use that to their advantage, use that as the leverage now so that they can attain power. We have to wake up as a nation and we have to realize that there's a multiplicity of problems facing this land. Almost in every village and every area you go, there's somebody selling drugs there, destroying our generation. We the citizens see it. We wonder how the police isn't seeing it. And we wonder why nothing is being done about it. And sometimes as adults, we hear people saying, okay, they've moved away from the discussion of drugs. They're talking about weed. And they say it's okay to smoke weed. And guess what? We believe like we're blind. We operate like we're blind. When we have so many of our young people tripping out and running off and they're walking all over the streets and we're saying, yeah man, he minded too weak. He couldn't handle the good weed. When are we going to wake up and become objective and to realize how many of our children are graduating from high school and they can't find jobs to fit the qualifications that they have? And therefore, we need to start looking at who is going to be that individual that will bring jobs to this country, and so that our young people can be gainfully employed. Have we noticed how much of our natural resources are being exported and other countries are being enriched while we remain poor? Have we noticed that we are not developing many of our natural resources right here? Because we can use developing natural resources right here in order to create downstream employment, in order to create jobs for our people, but those raw materials are exported for a very small or fraction of the cost of what they're really worth. Then they're being polished up and we have the end product now being brought back to us, and it is sold at such a large and exorbitant price. Have we not noticed what is happening? That we are fighting. That we're fighting with the other race. We're fighting and we're battling. And we aren't even seeing that in the midst of our fighting, we aren't going anywhere as a nation. That all we're doing is we are destroying ourselves. And sometimes we operate as if we are gullible and unable to think objectively for ourselves. We are citizens of this country. God has given to us a brain. God has given to us the ability to process information. That we have a cognitive part of us that we can think. Why not let us use that to think about who do we want to lead us? Why not let us encourage political debate in our country so that we can be able to properly listen to the potential leaders ventilating what their plans are and how they're going to get to that plan, instead of just sitting down and saying, oh, that's me by, because we're of the same race. Oh, I can't vote for he because we're not of the same race. When are we going to move past this racial divide? You know, the colonial masters that worked for their benefit, because they came in as an extension of imperialism. We have colonialism. And they divided. And they took what they had to take. And they plundered and robbed and raped our country. And they enriched themselves in the process. And now they are gone in terms of their physical presence of dominance through slavery and indentureship. And we are still here, what? We are still fighting. We are still fighting with ourselves. And we are still battling. And what are we doing? In the process of fighting and battling, we are destroying ourselves. We are stagnating our country. We need to wake up and not allow ourselves to be pawns in the hands of our politicians. We need to wake up and begin to view each other, not so much as to, well, the pigmentation of your skin and the texture of your hair, or which race you're from, and therefore, well, use me by. And rather, we need to begin to look at the principles and the content of a person's character, and to see their ability and willingness and genuineness to lead us to a better place, to lead us to a more developed state as a nation, as a people. We need to begin to look for persons who will govern this land and govern it so that everyone is going to benefit. That no one race would have to feel as though if this person is in power, then okay, I am okay because that person is of my race. And if that person is in power, then I am okay because that person is of my race. We need to begin to find people that when we elect them, that regardless of what race we are, we know that that person is going to represent the interests of every race equally, because they see us all as one. And we do not have to go and sell our souls politically in order to get a piece of land or in order to get a contract. But people can be evaluated objectively based on their qualifications and their ability and capacity to perform that task and be given that task without favor because of political affiliation. And one can be able to speak clearly and truthfully about issues affecting the nation and themselves without fear of victimization. It's time we wake up and realize that in between our ears, we have a brain. We are individuals who are emotional, we're spiritual, we're physical, we're psychological, but also we have the ability to think. We have the ability to develop. We have the ability to process information. We have that cognitive capacity. And so as a nation, I ask ourselves the same question. How do we determine what is right? How do we know what is right? Do we know it is right because someone of your race is saying it? Does that make it right? Do I know it's right because the person who is saying it is my race? And do I know it's wrong because the person who is saying it is not of my race? So do I believe everything that someone says that is my race? And then I say that if someone else says something different and is of another race, I don't believe. We need to use our minds and stop allowing ourselves to be pawns in the hands of our politicians. We need to demand more from our political leaders. We need to demand a plan of development. We need to demand how are we going to get there. We need to demand that strategy. We need to demand more and stop letting our political leaders think that we're going to follow them because of the color of their skin. We need to demand principles. We need to demand plan. We need to demand a way in which we're going to see that happening. Because if we don't, we are doomed. And we can identify racism and we can say it's a problem, and it is in some sections of our society. But there are a whole lot of other problems that we don't want to talk about. We don't want to talk about what's happening in our homes and how the family is falling apart. We don't want to talk about how many fathers are becoming increasingly absent from the lives of their children and from the household where their children are born. We don't want to talk about the high rates of unemployment and the way in which our dollar is being devalued. We don't want to talk about the high rates of unemployment and have that discussion. We need to wake up as a nation and recognize that we should stop assessing what is right or what is wrong because of the ethnicity of the spokesperson. And we need to begin to look at the content of the character. Because at the end of the day, God has given to us the ability to think. And who are we going to blame if we're not thinking properly? Who are we going to blame if we're not seeing things correctly? We should have to blame our own selves. And that is why we need to wake up. Be wise. The Bible says it's righteousness that exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. So we need to come to God. Do what is right in His sight. And we need to stop being so biased, so prejudicial, so discriminatory, and so racial as a people. And I want to commend many of my fellow Guyanese who have not fallen into this pit of racism and fallen into this thing about discrimination and being prejudicial in your judgment. But you have kept a steady course, seeing truth through the eyes of God and His Word, the Bible. And we thank God for you. And we pray that more would be like you. Wake up, my friends. Wake up, my fellow Guyanese. Let's see what is true and what is right. Not through the eyes of our ethnicity, but through the eyes of God's Word, the Bible.